Hey, welcome. Today, we're diving into the heart of Good Friday. We're going to look at three key scriptural readings that, when you put them all together, tell one incredibly powerful and cohesive story about what this day really means. So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the basics, what this day is and the texts we're looking at. Then we'll jump back in time to an ancient prophecy, look at a really unique theological idea, and then walk through the story of the Passion itself. Finally, we'll tie it all together. Let's get into it. All right, first things first. Before we can understand the meaning, we have to know what we're working with. So, what exactly is Good Friday? And which specific scriptures are we focusing on today? We call it Good Friday, but the source material uses a more formal title, the Friday of the Passion of the Lord. It's a day set aside specifically for the solemn, quiet remembrance of the crucifixion and death of Jesus. Our whole understanding is really built on these three scriptural pillars. And check out the structure here. We've got one reading from the Old Testament, that's from the book of Isaiah, and then two from the New Testament, the letter to the Hebrews and the Gospel of John. So let's start with that first reading. To do that, we actually have to go way back, centuries before the events of the New Testament, to hear this really powerful and honestly kind of honking prophecy that sets the stage for everything else. So this is the opening line from the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament. And at first glance, it sounds amazing, right? Victory, prosperity, exaltation. But as you keep reading, the verses that follow paint a very, very different picture. And it is so crucial to remember where this comes from. We are in the Old Testament. This was written long, long before Jesus was born. And it established this prophetic expectation, this idea of a figure who was yet to come. So Isaiah introduces this incredible figure known as the suffering servant. And what's so wild about this idea is that the servant's pain and his death aren't just random or tragic. No, they have a purpose. His suffering is meant to atone for the wrongs of other people, to bring them healing. This concept is absolutely central to the whole story. Okay, so keep that ancient prophecy of a suffering servant in your mind. Now, let's fast forward a few hundred years to the New Testament and see how the early followers of Jesus started to connect those dots, giving that suffering figure a powerful new identity. Now for our second reading, this time from the New Testament. It's from the letter to the Hebrews, and it introduces this really potent title for Jesus, a high priest. But the text makes it super clear this is not the kind of priest anybody was used to. And this just lays out the contrast perfectly. So on one hand, you have the traditional high priest. He offered animal sacrifices, right? He was the middleman. But Hebrews presents Christ as a sympathetic high priest. And why sympathetic? Because he lived it. He experienced human weakness. And the sacrifice he offers, it's not an animal, it's himself. Okay, so we've got the Old Testament prophecy of a suffering servant, and we have the New Testament theology of a sympathetic high priest. Now, let's turn to our third and final reading, the gripping, almost eyewitness-style account of the event itself. This quote comes from the Gospel of John, also in the New Testament. And it's part of this incredibly detailed moment-by-moment narrative of Jesus' last hours, leading up to these final powerful words from the cross. It is finished. And this passage is long. It walks us through the entire sequence of events. The arrest, the trial with Pilate, the brutal crucifixion, and finally his death and burial. The source material we're looking at says the whole point of this narrative is to show love to the end. All right, this is it. This is where all the threads come together. We've looked at three really different kinds of texts, right? An Old Testament prophecy, a New Testament theological letter, and a dramatic New Testament narrative. They aren't just separate stories. They're meant to be read as one single unfolding message. So, what is that combined message? What do you get when you put it all together? How do you connect that idea of a sympathetic high priest all the way back to an ancient prophecy about a suffering servant? It really breaks down beautifully like this. The Old Testament gives us the what? A servant is going to suffer to save others. Then, the New Testament gives us the who and the how. Jesus is that sympathetic high priest, and his selfless sacrifice is the ultimate act of love. You see? It's like this perfect theological loop, connecting ancient prophecy directly to a person and an event. So, what's the response to all this? After hearing this powerful, interwoven story, what are you supposed to do?
Well, according to our source, it's not about big, loud debates. The takeaway is actually something much simpler, much more profound: to venerate, or to honor, the cross in quiet, sorrowful reflection.
And so we'll just end with the prayer that was provided in our source material. It feels like the right way to close, as a final contemplative thoughts on everything we've just unpacked. We adore you, O Christ, and we praise you. By your holy cross, you have redeemed the world. Amen.